A question for those who were declared missing. What happened to you?
One of my earliest memories is of when I got lost. When I was 5 years old, my family went on vacation to Scotland. We ended up in some backwater place with nothing but forests around. There wasn't much to do, so my sister and I decided to play hide and seek. I came up with a brilliant idea to hide right opposite the front door of the cottage we were staying in, under a huge bush. I watched my sister look for me for about 5 minutes before she obviously gave up and went inside. However, I don't give up so easily, so I decided to stay in the bushes until someone found me. After a short period of time, about 15 minutes or so, more people started joining the game. My parents ran back and forth while I watched and giggled, thinking, I'm so clever for hiding so well. More and more people joined in, including vacationers from other cottages, park employees, and police officers. I kept sitting in the bushes for many hours as it got dark, enjoying the game. My sister was only 7, so she wasn't involved in the search and just sat on the porch. As it got darker, my yellow jacket started to stand out, and finally, after searching the forest all day, my sister realized I was sitting right in front of her. The best game of hide and seek in my life. This happened about 10 years ago. I had just moved to California with my now ex-husband. Our downstairs neighbor was a crazy drug addict who constantly harassed and fought with us. One time, a neighbor on our floor decided to do some renovations, and the downstairs neighbor came running up, threatening us because she thought I was making the noise. She was impossible to reason with. Whenever I left the house, I tried to do it as quietly as possible so she wouldn't come up and mess with our apartment while we were gone. Anyway, I filed an anonymous complaint with the building management and reported her to the police. It turned out there were a lot of complaints against her. My husband picked me up from the police station, and we went out for lunch. Those idiots from the management company went to her and told her about my complaints. When we got back, she was banging on our door and screaming. We just left. Screw her. We went to Walmart, bought a tent and supplies, and headed to Yosemite for the weekend to get away. We managed to sneak back into the apartment, got some sleep, and whispered to our neighbor that we were going camping for the weekend, after which I texted my mom, brother, and sister. But for some reason, only my sister got my message. In my last phone call with my mom, I had told her about the downstairs neighbor threatening me, and then I disappeared. We came back after 4 days to find my voicemail full of desperate messages from my mom and brother. They had called the police, telling them that the downstairs neighbor had killed us, made masks from our skin, and was wearing them. My mom didn't believe our neighbor when he said we had gone camping. She thought he was covering for the downstairs neighbor because her daughter never liked camping. It's true. It was my first time camping. After 3 days of worry and suffering, they finally called my sister to tell her I was dead. My sister laughed and said I was camping. My mom fell silent and then responded, "What? Why do you think that?" She texted me, "Why didn't you call me when you thought she was dead?" When we got home and I got cell service, I listened to all those messages and immediately called my parents, then the police to cancel the missing persons report. A few years later, I tried joking about it. Remember when you thought the downstairs neighbor killed us? That was just a crazy weekend. No one laughs yet. Maybe it's still too soon. I work in emergency services, and one day we got a call about a person complaining of leg pain. We arrived to find a very polite young man sitting by the side of the road with huge blisters on his feet. He told us he had attended a relative's funeral, got very upset, and decided to take a walk to clear his mind. So he just kept walking and walking for 4 days straight. It turned out he lived in the same place where I grew up, 400 kilometers from there. And we talked about that village, the good local pubs, and so on. He admitted he had a bit of depression and might need professional help. Unfortunately, all we could do was give him a lift to the hospital, and we did everything we could. Later that same shift, I was on Facebook and saw that a school friend had posted about a missing person. It was our walker. I called the police and informed them of the guy's location, and they were very happy. I don't remember how old we were, probably around 10. My friend and I decided to collect fallen leaves from our neighbors' yards for money. We went house to house offering our services for $5. Eventually, we went to so many houses that we ended up at an intersection and realized we didn't know where we were, as we had never left our neighborhood before. Then it got dark, and we couldn't read street names or recognize anything familiar in the dim light of the street lamps. Eventually, while we were wandering around, we heard the sound of a police siren and saw the lights of a police car. The cops stopped by us and asked for our names. They put us in their car and drove us home. To us 10-year-old boys, it seemed like we had driven a long way, even though we had only gone 4 blocks. Our parents were really angry about it,
and they even took away our hard-earned money.
I left home where I was being mistreated, leaving a note clearly stating my intention never to return. An hour or two later, I got a call from the police station saying they had received a missing person report about me.
I explained the situation, and they wished me good luck. Since I was an adult, I had the right to leave.
That was 3 years ago. I went on vacation for 3 weeks.
During the second week, my boss called me to ask if I was okay because the police had called him to say there was a missing person report about me. My neighbor had filed the report because she was worried she hadn't seen me in a week.
I was actually touched. At least now you know you have good neighbors. My favorite story on this topic is about my cousin. He was 4 years old, and we were on a family vacation at the beach. At some point, he just disappeared, and we searched for him for hours, calling the police.
It turned out he had gone to a hotel 2 minutes from the beach to take a poop, met other kids there, and started playing with them.
All the adults thought he was a guest's child. He even had lunch there when they set the table. Meanwhile, we were ready to hire divers to search for him underwater. When I was about 6, my family was on vacation in Yosemite. We were staying in a small tent camp.
There, I met a boy who was a bit older than me, and we went off to explore the surroundings.
We wandered too far and met a bear cub in the forest.
We just stood and stared at each other for a few minutes before going our separate ways.
When we returned to the camp, park rangers were already looking for us. My parents were going crazy. For some reason, my story about the bear cub wasn't as cool to them as it was to me. I had an emotional breakdown in 2015 after losing my job, and it had been a tough year overall.
So, I packed my backpack, got on my motorcycle, and headed to another city to clear my mind.
I had enough money for a week, turned off my phone, and left. For a whole week, I relaxed on the beach, partied, went to bars and clubs. I stayed in a hostel and socialized with other hostel guests, and overall, it was an amazing week, and I felt much better. I packed up and headed home, and at an intersection, I was stopped by cops.
It turned out that 2 of my former colleagues, who I had seen after being fired, were worried about me and came to my house to check on me. My housemates told them they hadn't seen me for days, and they started searching the city for me, then reported me missing to the police. The police checked my records, saw that my phone had been off, noted that I hadn't been active on social media, and that I hadn't been in touch with family.
While I was trying to distract myself from my crappy life,
everyone else was fearing the worst. The police had circulated my motorcycle's number, and when I hit the highway, it must have flagged in the patrol's computer, so they stopped me.
The cop was polite and just wanted to make sure I was okay. He called the dispatcher to have me removed from the missing persons list. In Australia, you are only removed from the missing persons list after a police officer sees you in person.
8 hours later, I got home and found that many people had been worried about me.
Honestly, I thought no one would care about my disappearance, otherwise I would have left a note. My brother was missing for a whole year.
He had disappeared before but only for a few days. He has paranoid schizophrenia and often suffers from hallucinations.
We live in New York, and our parents had no idea where to look for him. For a year, we frequently went to the police to identify bodies. He had no friends or a girlfriend he could go to. My brother had just vanished. A year later, we got a call from a hospital in Washington.
My brother had been picked up on the street in a very emaciated state.
It turned out he had gone to Washington to warn the government of some threat, due to his illness. He had refused food because he believed it was poisoned.
The only reason he was still alive was because the homeless people took care of him.
He was barely recognizable when they found him, covered in flea bites.
He's physically healthy now, though his mental health remains poor.
At least he hasn't tried to run away again. Whenever I see homeless people on the street, I always think of this incident. I checked myself into a rehab clinic. I don't know why I didn't tell anyone, but I was an addict and not thinking clearly.
My boyfriend, now ex, was the only person who knew about it. About a week later, the hospital's reception called me and said my mom had been harassing them, demanding information about me and claiming I had been missing for a month. She was exaggerating. By law, they couldn't give her any information, so they asked me to call her and explain everything. When I got out, I saw messages from many people asking if I was alive.
Even my old job had reached out.
It turned out that my best friend and my brother had contacted my ex-boyfriend, but he ignored them and didn't tell me they were looking for me. If he had, I would have asked him to let them know where I was, and all this worry could have been avoided. I felt very embarrassed that I made so many people worry unnecessarily. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new super interesting discussions, and in the meantime, check out our other videos.